Mahadai Das was born in Eccles, East Bank Demerara, Guyana, in 1954. She wrote poetry from her early school days at Bishop's High School. She completed her first degree at the University of Guyana and her second, a master's, at Columbia University, New York. A doctoral program in philosophy at the University of Chicago was interrupted by illness. Mahadai's life, perhaps more than most, was shaped by dramatic events. In 1971, her mother died while giving birth to her 10th child, leaving Mahadai, then 17, with considerable responsibility for her siblings. The family remained in Eccles, where Das's father, Tloki, was a rice farmer. In 1973, her brother Patrick disappeared while in the Guyanese jungle and was never heard from again. In 1971, Das was crowned Miss Diwali. In the early 1970s, while at the University of Guyana, she was recruited to the Guyana National Service, or GNS, spending time on the site at Kimbia in the Upper Demerara Berbice area. As a young poet, Das published her first pieces in Kai, the official literary publication of Guyana's History and Arts Council, as well as in other local publications.
Mahadai was also involved with the messenger group, which was dedicated to bringing to public notice that Indian art forms were equally part of the Guyanese tradition. They put on several public shows and produced a few issues of their journal, Heritage. The group was formed by Rajkumari Singh and included Rooplal Monar, Guska Kisoon, Gora Singh, and Henry Mutu. Between 1973 and 1975, Mahadai Das, along with other members of the messenger group, joined the cultural division of the Guyana National Service. She remained with GNS long after others had left, an idealistic revolutionary whose enthusiasm and hopes are to be found in her first published collection, I Want to Be a Poetess of My People.
Mahadai's first collection, I Want to Be a Poetess of My People, 1977, traced the roots of the Guyanese people from slavery and indentureship to independence. The collection calls for a new identity independent of colonial powers, though it also bears the marks of being beholden to the sloganizing politics of the time. I Want to Be a Poetess of My People speaks of her Indian heritage within a broad Caribbean environment, yet speaks little of her experience as a woman. As the title announces, Das's early poems assume an active, visionary role for the poet, as well as a clear sense of the constituency being addressed. The first poem in her first collection, They Came in Ships, offers an account of the arrival of Indian indentured laborers to Guyana. While the speaker proudly links herself to this history, she is also careful to acknowledge other figures from that historical moment, like Cuffy, Akara, and Crosby, and to remember Logis and Negayards. Das also alludes to class and caste hierarchies at the start of the poem, suggesting that the Atlantic crossing unsettles these hierarchies. The speaker does look backwards, but the emphasis is on seeing beyond, looking ahead.
The poems which best represent Mahadai Das's gifts are those which explore her consciousness of the complex heritage of being Indo-Guyanese. As a child of a peasant family, she was sharply aware that the history of indenture and plantation labor had shaped her own evolution. She reviews that history in They Came in Ships, a poem which achieves compression and impact through an elusive montage construction, picking up scraps of her own researches like the voice of Deveux. I wrote the Queen a letter, for the whimpering of the coolies in their logies would not let me rest. and making effective use of the simplest rhetorical devices, such as repetition. They came in fleets of ships. They came in droves, like cattle, brown like cattle, eyes limpid like cattle. The poem also demonstrates a taste of verbal wit, which becomes an increasingly important element in her later work. Referring to the complacent attitudes of the British government, investigators who came to the colony in 1870, she puns neatly. The commissioners came, capital spectacles with British frames.
They came in ships from far across the seas, Britain colonizing the East in India, transporting her chains from Chotanagpur and the Ganges plain. Westwards came the Withby, like the Hesperus, alike the island bound for Tel Rozak. Wooden missions of imperialist design, human victims of Her Majesty's victory. They came in fleets of ships, they came in droves like cattle, brown like cattle, eyes limpid like cattle. Some came with dreams of milk and honey riches, others came fleeing famine and death, all alike they came, the dancing girls, Rajput soldiers, tall and proud, escaping the penalty of their pride, the stolen wives, afraid and despondent, all alike crossing the black waters, Brahmin and Shamar alike they came, at least with hope in their hearts. On the platter of the plantocracy they were offered disease and death. I saw them dying at street corners, alone and hungry they died, starving for the want of a crumb of British bread and the touch of a healing hand. Today I remember my forefathers' gaunt gaze. My mind's eye sweeps over my children of yesterday, my children of tomorrow, the piracy of innocence, the loss of light in their eyes. I stand between posterity's vision and her history. I alone today am alive, seeing beyond, looking ahead. I do not forget the past that has molded the present. The present is a caterer for the future. I remember logies, barrackroom rages, nigger yard. My grandmother worked in the field for honorable mention. Creole gang, child labor, second prize. I recall Lalabaji. How could I forget? Enmore rose in arms for the children of Lenora. Remember 1/3 quota, coolie woman? Was your blood spilled so that I could reject my history and forget tears and shadow pally leaves? Here at the edge of the horizon, I hear voices crying in the wind, coffee shouting, remember 1763, John Smith, if I am a man of God, let me join forces with black suffering. Accra, I too had a vision before I lost it. Atta, in the beginning I was with the struggle, and Nauvoo cried, I wrote the Queen a letter for the whimpering of the coolies in their logies, would not let me rest. Burment had the law been in my hands, and the cry of the coolies echoed across the land. They came in droves at the door of his office, beseeching him to ease the yoke of their burden, and the Crosby struck in rage against the planters. In vain. He was stripped naked of his rights, and the cry of coolies continued. The commissioners came, capital bespectacles with British frames, consulting managers about the cost of immigration. They forgot the purpose of their coming. The commissioners left, $50 bounty remained. And dreams of a cow and endless calves and endless reality in chains.
If they came in ships as weighted towards a picture of what was suffered, the next poem in the sequence, Cast Aside, Reminiscent Foreheads of Desolation, warns against becoming trapped in a prison of suffering, reminding Indians that there was creation too. You have helped build this land, brought forth out of your womb a new industry of waving paddy leaves.
The labor provided by enslaved and indentured people, so violently misused in the past, is recognized as a powerful resource to be redeployed to shape the nation. In Look in the Vision for Smiles of the Harvest, the speaker describes her own laboring body alongside hundreds of other cotton reapers dressed in the green of the GNS uniform. Each pair of hands going back and forth from plant to bag in artistic precision, from bag to plant. The labor provided on the Kimbia cotton plantations is presented as contributions to the future of all Guyanese rather than the ruling class. On Events That Occurred at Kimbia, Das insightfully suggests that patterns of colonial domination were so ingrained in Guyana that they had sedimented into a form of superstition, requiring a jolt for a truly national culture to be engendered. What if people, with their hands stuck from their ears and tongues laughing outside their mouths, would jeer away the threat of superstitious domination? Militant makes similar claims for the transformative necessity of change. I want my blood to churn, change, 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 march. The drumming beat of the poem underscoring a sense of the people being drilled in marching and in a politics/poetics of revolutionary change.
Poems such as Militant and He Leads the People have a naively exalted tone and are full of revolutionary cliches. More interesting are the poems written in response to her experiences of Kimbia, the GNS camp in the Guyanese interior, where there was an attempt to revive cotton production. In Look in the Vision for the Smiles of the Harvest, Das displays an acute sensitivity to the doubleness of experience, exploring the satisfactions of taming wild nature whilst hinting that there is something historically disquieting in the regimented production of acres of cotton and suggesting that something has been violated in the destruction of the wilderness. When the darkness falls around this Kimbia jungle, like a cascade of tenderness, like a mantle of love. Hear the eerie cries of baboons of desolation driven into the forest. Listen their whimpers of subjugation, of lost dominance.
Look in the vision for smiles of the harvest. In the cotton fields, 5,000 acres of cotton fields I stood. Two women's hands, an empty rice bag around my waist. Two eyes surveying the forest-fringed horizon around me. Hundreds of reapers, greenbacks bent, greenbacks bent. Each pair of hands going back and forth from plant to bag in artistic precision, from bag to plant, rooting the ball of whitened silver, fruit of a dream born 200 years ago, when Magdalenenberg bled with averted fertility. Here I stand, the palm of my brown hand, shading two gleaming eyes from the richness of sunlight overhead. Here I stand and survey all around the fruit born of frustration and pain and hope. Here I stand on my own soil. 5 months ago, I watched us trample yesterday's cruel baboons with the tractor and the plow. The baboons, they have retreated into the forest. Listen, at the end of the day of sun in my hair, cotton in my hand, sun on my back, cotton around my waist in a 50-pound bag. Listen, when the darkness falls around the Kimbian jungle, like a cascade of tenderness, like a mantle of love. Hear the eerie cries of baboons of desolation driven into the forest. Listen to their whimpers of subjugation, of lost dominance.
Although in this collection, Das is not immune to that sentimental abstraction, the people, she also portrays actual people rooted in their customary ways of looking at the world and their resistance to new ideas.
Rather than constituting community via ethnicity, the people in these poems are linked by their labor on the land, guided by a leader who is presented as visionary, determined, and gentle. It is easy now to read these poems as embarrassingly naive. We know how Burnham's vision for the cooperative Republic of Guyana turned out: oppressive, partisan, and corrupt. But anyone of Das's generation will remember the initial excitement surrounding the Burnham government's rhetoric of national pride and self-reliance in challenging colonial hierarchies of race and culture. Das's willing involvement in and endorsement of the GNS was a bold refusal of prevailing narratives of ethnicity. The GNS was seen by many as a crude method for engineering racial integration. As is now widely documented, GNS did function as an institution in which the abuse of women, Indian women, but others too, was not uncommon. It is evident that racial politics often dictated how conscripts were treated and who was conscripted in the first place. These historical facts shouldn't eclipse Daha's impulse to be part of a project with the potential to transform the atavistic status quo of racial politics in Guyana.
In this period, one feels that she was not always well served by those who supported and promoted her work. She was regarded as a valuable ornament by the cultural establishment of the ruling party as an Indian and a woman, and an exceptionally photogenic one at that. She was flattered, and the least meritorious aspects of her work encouraged, and not given the kind of constructive criticism which would have helped her to see what was genuine in her work and what was not, which has now been left high and dry by events and its own noisy slogalizing.